Good morning everybody and welcome back to Hyrule, where today we're going to be taking a look at all the progress that has currently been made on the Lego Zelda minifigure scale Hyrule Castle project. For those of you who don't know, now is a great time to be jumping in because we are recapping everything that I've done in the last 5 years on this model. I know we've done this before, but given the fact that we just recently finished the ground floor and that I haven't done high quality renders of various different locations throughout the castle, I thought now would be a good chance to sort of reorientate us and show you what is both being done and what is coming next. So this castle was built in minifigure scale and recreates the entire Breath of the Wild castle island. It will be made up of 4 layers and is about 2 meters by 2 meters in dimensions, with an estimated height of around 2 meters as well. The castle is largely made up of rockwork, and while eventually I hope to use a more complicated rockwork technique, that's just not viable for planning and building in studio, at least at any decent speeds, which if you know for this model is really important. Given that this model already stands at 70,000 plus pieces, it is really interesting to see it come together, and today I'm going to take you on a tour through all of the interior rooms, as this is a pre-calamity castle, as well as hopefully show you how it all connects together. We're going to start our tour at the front gate, the 2 giant metal magnificable doors from Breath of the Wild, and while of course these ones appear in Breath of the Wild damaged, we know that this is what it would have looked like pre-calamity with the doors sealed, and believe me, we will be referencing pre-calamity and also Tears of the Kingdom stuff, such as the under secret passage that will exist underneath here when I get around to building it. If we open up the gates, you can see that there's some beautiful architectural details on either side. I've got the blue turrets at the top, and I've tried my best to use a variety of snot and other techniques to recreate some of the details. While the castle walls themselves are probably, it should be a little bit darker than this, I've chosen to use light bluish grey and then use dark bluish grey to sort of accentuate some accents and some more chiseled stonework, which adds a bit of contrast, which to be honest on this model is much needed, but also helps to distinguish things, a bit like the light effects that we used on sets like Barad-dûr in the Lord of the Rings line. Similarly, the rockwork is done in dark bluish grey and should probably be slightly lighter, actually the same tone as the castle rock, but if we all had it the same, it would be a big blob. A lot of the less important castle battlements end up with a light weathering effect, made up of a variety of different bricks. However, that's not possible if I want to continue sort of the distinguished and more refined stonework that we see on this front gate. Regardless, we've got a pattern on the floor here as you cross over the bridge, 4 beautiful banners done here representing the Hyrule sort of insignia. I'm hoping to get my hands on some stickers eventually to be able to add to the crests or some more ornate markings, or maybe I'll come up with a better technique as we go through time. However, that is not a problem for right now in the project. I've got another 5 years and maybe Lego will even make an official piece by then. As you go through the gates though, you can see the tiling on the floor and you enter onto this main stone grey path that starts the slope upside the castle. Now this isn't finished yet because obviously it goes high pretty quickly, but you can see here this is definitely a pre-calamity castle with all of the grass on the ground and the stone path going up. We need some trees and some vegetation around here, but to start with we're going to drop down and sort of follow the castle around to the left. While this path isn't complete, you can see that down below we've got this wall of rockwork up until the entrance to the west passage. This sits just to the left if you're looking straight at the castle and provides the first sort of minecart track entrance. We'll go inside here in just a second, but let's continue over the top as we take a look up on the sort of platform above with a little tent and a brazier here to actually light and fire the cannons. So perhaps a watch post, not a very pleasant one I can imagine. There's a variety of trees across this middle, but here you can see I guess the more piney sort of spiky trees. There's also a fir tree and some apple trees which are a bit more rounder spread over these ledges. We use a variety of different flower colours, but there in aqua these are supposed to be more woodland ones. I'm thinking blue nightshade silent princess style things, although the silent princesses themselves will be represented differently and will be rare due to the almost extinct nature of the flower. Around the west passage there's also a crane and a boat, symbolising that this is one of the many docking entrances to the castle. This one mostly I guess for exports from the mine, whereas the docks is your main commercial trading hub for the castle itself. Further around you can see that the roller coaster track from the west passage pokes out here. Again, we'll come back to that later. And then we've got these big plates which are easily removable to reveal the interior of both the west passage and the lockup which sits beneath this section. There are 2 castle walls currently on this section, one which is solid here next to this sparring arena, another battery of cannons, and this, you can imagine, is a little area for soldiers to practice their melee skills. Again, more trees and bushes and not much flowers around here. And then going down just a small slope and going down backwards. Again, this is another removable section that is done separately. Everything in this castle is sort of like a giant puzzle that fits together. But you've got these fir trees using the fern elements upside down, some more flowers, and this opens us up to a archery range. you can see a little pit here, which is actually the lore explanation for how the Staunox ends up in the lockup prison. It was lowered down here as a imprisoned Hinox when it was still alive. So the equipment for us to lower that into that room is here, correctly placed above the Hylian Shield Staunox trial. There are 3 different places for you to start your archery challenge and a variety of targets hiding in the trees. The only other tree variant over here to note is the birch tree. This section of castle wall has an accurate archway that passes underneath it towards the inside of the castle, and again both of these wall segments are textured up and sit on their own unique curve. Passing underneath that wall then, you come to what I have dubbed the switchback. This is the path that leads up from the prison entrance by the docks all the way to the main path at the top of the castle. And where you enter it here, we have a little tiny graveyard, which is very cute and it's a unique use of space. There's no indication that there was a graveyard on the castle or in this specific section in the real game. However, it was a nice use of space that I really love. Down from the switchback here, you also have a little pond. You've got a couple of lily pads, and this one is quite overhung, making this one of the more interesting sections of rockwork. Up above is an unfinished doorway that will lead into the water pump room and that sits underneath Zelda's tower, but that's not finished now, so we will not dedicate any time to it right now. I'm going to choose to go down the switchback right now, as up only leads to one more castle wall with a couple of trees, some more ornate bushes, and another slope that's going to lead up to that main path around the base of Zelda's tower. We just haven't got up that high. This is one of the more finished areas, as I love all of these small foliage and bright colours and the sort of poplar style trees. We've even got some foliage climbing up the wall. But as I said, we're going down the switchback where you pass by another section of wall. This section of wall sort of is a sort of a wild area, a bit of a nature reserve, I guess, kind of place. Maybe almost botanical gardens for people to walk through and enjoy. There's a bench and an empty space around the other side of the wall for some viewing or just looking out over the Kingdom of Hyrule. Down at the bottom of the switchback you can see the entrance to the docks here, but before we go in there we should turn back and have a look at what was inside this section that we just covered. By lifting off all of these panels we will reveal the west passage and the lockup. Let's return to the front of the castle and start there. At the west passage entrance, you first go through a little mine shaft. There's a little diamond in the crate here, as this is a rocky section that you pass through, and then you enter into a corridor where you find the first minecart track. The compromise for this model was to use the slightly less accurate looking but functional minecart roller coaster track pieces, and we've got this black minecart here that is built using a helmet to recreate the sort of bomb throwing mechanism that you use to traverse the caverns. The minecart can roll through, it goes just through this windy corridor, then passes outside that we looked at before, and then passes back in before docking and ending the minecart track in the west passage. From here, you go into one of the Korok rooms where there are some decayed guardians and also a little pond where you boil a hard-boiled egg in Breath of the Wild to reveal a Korok. We will be adding actual Korok builds to all the Koroks in the castle. However, again, this is a late stage part of the project, but the location is here with the 3 statues and the bird egg on the other side of the room, ready for you to come and put it in and boil those eggs in the little pools. Up this little slope then brings us into sort of the mining side where they were still sort of excavating the west passage, maybe looking for minerals or for guardian remains, and there's a little crack in the wall which is obviously hasn't been expanded like it is in Breath of the Wild, but can see that we are leaving into one of the corridors from the official game. Down this corridor is usually blocked, meaning we've added an entirely new section over here, and this probably may be expanded in the future or connect to other layers. But as it's completely custom, we had the chance to add a couple more fun and sort of quirky little rooms. So coming down this corridor and then turning left, you can see that there is a statue, and then at the end we have 2 rooms. We have one with a door, and then one that is open on the left, and there's still space for some more over on the right. Starting with the room on the left without the door, this is a little Easter egg to the shops found in the dungeons of Ocarina of Time. So you can imagine that this is where castle guards come after a long day of work to buy some supplies for their families or just shopping for fun. You can see we've got a slab of butter, a red potion, and a couple of other items for sale, including some armor as well, which is a really cute little room. Obviously it's referencing the shops that Link uses in game, but feels like something that the castle should probably have to keep its soldiers entertained. At the end of the corridor is actually a fan submitted room. This was part of a competition we ran in 2024 for you guys to get a chance to design a room for Hyrule Castle, and the winner would be included here. This was judged on by Joseph Zawada, who built the giant Twilight Princess castle alongside Brick Wizard Studios and Hero of Time. All 3 fantastic people decided in the end that the Superminster submission that you're seeing before here, the milk bar from well, from Majora's Mask, with a couple of modifications, including a Tingle and Lon Lon Cow portrait, was what deserved to make it into the castle. And you can see that here with its wonderful stage with the 4 instruments on it and the beautiful tiling on the floor. And again, makes perfect sense for these soldiers to relax after a long day of work. Let's go back to Cannon Castle. So this was the corridor where we broke through from the west passage, and going the other way you'll once again split with a fork. To go to the right you reach the water pump room, which goes super high up. This room actually isn't finished yet because it goes straight up to the top, but you can see we've got grates on the floor, there's a waterfall coming down. This is actually the base of Zelda's tower, and it's surrounded by this really striking brown woodwork, which is a lovely contrast colour to have. We have crates of supplies, including some Brillo sponges and some various different liquids, and then if you go up the ladders, they're a little bit dilapidated, I must say, you reach the control room here, which has a wonderful window technique, and around the back you have a couple of different alcoves, as well as the main control switch for the sort of wind gust that you are able to use in this room. There's a couple of other details up here, but nothing too major beyond the banners on the wall. It's a really cute room, but let's go back to the corridor down below. As this is sort of a dead end right now, it will connect to up above later on. But if we go to the left at the junction, we enter into the lockup, specifically the back corridor of the lockup, which is another area which we can see in game but isn't complete. This corridor has been sort of unified and runs straight out to the exit, which is right by the docks where we started. This is where you can enter into the main lockup. Passing underneath this original gate brings you into a corridor with a row of prison cells, 4 on each side. All of these open, they all have flush grates for the water runoff on the floor, and one of them even has an exit to the outside as if there is a prison break in motion. There's a little storage room with a spider and an apple and a spear down below. There's tunnels for rats, and the water chalices and all the control switches run down the middle of the room, which is fully curved, using a huge variety of really interesting techniques. At the end of the corridor then, brings us to the Stalnox room, which is a oval. This one again inspired by the Colosseum, but looks fantastic, recreating the room where you get the Hylian shield in Breath of the Wild, except for because we're pre-calamity, the Stalnox is not yet a Stalnox and is a Hinox. Again, chibified, ignore the fact that he looks so ugly, but I really like this room, one of my favourites in the castle for sure. And that is every room in the west side of the castle. Bringing us back to the outside, we can see that the lockup exit brings us right back to the docks, which is where we need to go next. Peeping around the corner here, you can see the great flame blade on display, ready for you to use it on the puzzle to light the brazier in the docks. We've got the big stone pillar coming across, as well as the steps that go up from the sort of wooden jetties where you can park the boats. I really love this room in game, and I'm really pleased this is the first section that I built, so I'm really pleased that it still sort of holds up 5 years on. The path continues up and around to the giant brazier, which is built on this sort of half hexagon that sort of sticks out from the wall. This stone pattern here, and then there's a little passageway that leads up to the library. I'm going to pause this here so that we can continue going back to the exterior, but just know that this connects to the ground floor of the library. Continuing the docks, you've got a rock wall that continues and wraps around the entire space, and lots of water in the middle. This room may actually have to change in the future, squishing in this wall a little bit more to create a slightly more accurate shape, but also to accommodate the Ganon boss chamber, which will sit disconnected in the centre of the castle one day whenever we're finished, along with an Easter egg, of course, to Tis the Kingdom underneath. Nothing else really to see in the docks here. It's one of my favourite rooms in the castle, but let's go back to the outside, because above it and continuing around to the left, you can see that there's another small castle wall segment, this time joined by a decayed guardian that is currently being excavated. This is not one from the Calamity again, we're pre-Calamity, so this is one that's still being excavated by Sheikah researchers. On this platform as well, this was the first exterior section we built, there's this little wall segment, and then not much else going on here. This one is one of those ones that's completely detached from anywhere else in the castle. Dropping down a bit, there's another guardian currently being excavated. This one's surrounded by wooden scaffolding of all times. You'll see a Sheikah torch underneath a little tarpaulin here, some various different sketch pads and other guardian remains, including some water that they're using to wash off parts of the guardian, ancient screw and cog and various different tools around on a bench, as well as some mud on the floor as if it has been sort of washed off and excavated. A couple of small bushes, and then we pass over a small rocky bridge over a waterfall, which is one of a couple of waterfalls in the castle. These strips of blue are really striking, and I absolutely love how they break up the monotony of the colour on the castle. This waterfall also cuts between 2 grass platforms that are relatively uninhabited. Up above, they may receive some flowers at some point in the future, but we're getting close to another unfinished section of castle now. Back down to the path below, we pass past a small tree into a sort of bird keeping one. You could imagine these as carrier pigeons or sort of budgies and parakeets that the castle royalty are keeping. There's a bird fountain, some very different lush vegetation, a couple of different coloured birds, some seed on the floor, a bucket, and a small birdhouse attached to a and a small birdhouse attached to a stick with a unwanted surprise left behind. I particularly like this coupe design as well. The path continues around and has an entrance into the east passage, which we will come back to in just a second, but down below is a logging area where certain bits of logging have been done and trees have been cut down. However, there is still a thriving forest to the right, largely made up of apple trees. There is a golden apple in there as well, and you can notice that there are some small cherry blossoms, seed from the Deku tree, coming to sort of make its home in this sort of more forested area of the castle. There's actually a break in the waterfall here, so we're going to pause here and go through the east passage. I want to note though that the east passage is sitting beneath the exterior of the library, which is beautiful looking. I really love this curved outside wall. It's probably one of my second favorite section of Hyrule architecture that we've done so far, with these beautiful columns and slit windows and this door. This actually enters into the second floor of the library, which again we'll come back to in just a second, and you've got this wonderful blue tiled roof, and this is built on a curve in 3 sections and sort of slots into the side of this wall, which I really love. Anyway, I promised that we'd go into the east passage. Entering into the east passage, you are immediately faced with a roller coaster track for this section. You can board it here or go down manually on this really steep slope as it goes down, skims along this puddle with some ice crystals, and then sort of comes back up to rest in a more open space. The space then opens out into a bit of an arena, as this is where you fight the stone talus, which is recreated here perfectly, and then there's a wall to climb as this also back enters into the library. Specifically through the right hand side lower floor, you crawl through this broken section here, which I don't know why this has been excavated pre-calamity, but I wanted this path to join up, so here it is. And now we can talk about the inside of the library, another absolute favourite of mine. It's a really important room to get right. It's built on 3 hinged sections that come together. It has a technique that is a bit more advanced for its flooring to showcase the grey and white tiling a little bit easier, and it has the stairs at either end that go up. We've got the King's Study underneath one end, the opposite end from where we just entered, and a variety of sort of desks that fill up the floor of this room, which is currently not finished yet as it is missing a back wall, including the excavation site which leads on to sort of Ganon's chamber. However, inside the King's Study we have a couple of scrolls and a couple of extra details, including a royal banner hanging from the ceiling. However, my favourite Easter egg in this room comes on the upper balcony. I do love these columns and the way that everything arches together in the form of a monster cake, which is referencing the side quest where you find out that the Chancellor's favourite recipe is indeed monster cake. There's plenty of bookshelves around, of course, including the faux one that leads up from the docks on the ground floor. And then here on the second floor balcony, you can see those doors which led to the outside that we talked about earlier. But it's so bright and colourful. The red arches continue up to the ceiling. You've got these imposing grand columns at either end for this staircase that staggers up and up and up. And yeah, I just love this room. I've talked about it more in depth. You're more than welcome to go and check out that video. Back to the outside yet, you can see that the second layer here isn't finished, so we're going to drop back down. Here was that apple forest, and a waterfall sort of separates and sort of has split the terrain here. On the other side, we have another little cheeky reference to Breath of the Wild in the form of a tree that has been struck by lightning. It's the only dead tree to currently feature on the model, and you can see that it has been struck because there is a metal sword hanging in its branches. There's a birch tree and another apple tree, showing that sort of species aren't defined by terrain and seeds have blown across the gap as we continue around towards the front and reach the next castle wall section. This castle wall is a little more overgrown. There's a tree coming out the cliff here, some bigger bushes and some taller, brightly colourful plants. This one again sort of connects into the wall and is fairly isolated, but again I love how this wall segment looks with the masonry brick and then the points on the top. I can't wait to see this enclosed by more rock work up above eventually as well. And behind it we do just have a little training setup. We've got 3 practice dummies for soldiers on guard to sort of hone their skills and know the weak spots of a minifigure, I guess. Down even lower, this is one of the lowest points that the castle path, or I shouldn't say castle path, but the exterior platforms go on the castle. This one, because it's so low, is a little more swampy. You could imagine that water sits a bit more stagnant here or even washes up at high tide. Therefore, we've got a lot more dead foliage, a lot more of this flower stem part, and actually some active puddles in dark green to represent some more mossy, boggy kind of terrain. There's even some dark tan here for various different boulders, and I really like that this is a bit more unique and a bit different compared to elsewhere in the castle. However, unfortunately, it's one of the few spaces on the castle where if extra troops have been ordered in from Akala Citadel or outside the borders of Hyrule, this is where those poor conscripts or visiting troops would have to camp, as shown by this castle campsite here, which is full of soldiers, including a little table for them to prepare fish, which they are catching on fishing rods. They've got various different barrels and spears hanging around, and even 3 tents with a variety of different beds on the inside, which have their covers pulled back. We've got one in red and yellow in this tent, and then there's a blue one in another tent as well. I love this little camp. It's something very different. The white is striking of the tents, and I like the idea that visiting soldiers have to be parked somewhere and the garrison's only big for a certain amount. From here, the slope continues back up to the front of the castle where we've already seen. You can see a variety of smaller trees growing up into bigger ones as they surround this wagon. This is an abandoned wagon. This is something we see in one of the shots of the pre-calamity castle in Age of Calamity. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense that wagons would park somewhere. Maybe this is how the soldiers arrived, or maybe this is a merchant that's gotten stuck, or maybe it's just someone actively in motion. Either way, this wagon is posed here on this slope. I think it blends in quite well. And you'll notice that we are right back to the front, and that actually completes our brief overview and tour of Hyrule Castle. Wasn't actually so brief because there's a lot to see. My plan from here is to continue the main path upwards towards the first gatehouse and then use that spot as a motivation to fill in the entire second layer. Once that second layer is done, we're going to complete every interior in the castle, as most of them are now viable and possible to do. And as I know the spacing of the gatehouse, I'll be able to fill in some of the more basement details, such as the secret passage that the royals used to escape out the front of the castle. And unfortunately, Ganon's room will have to wait until the sanctum is complete as well. But the goal is to get the Great Hall in there, the cut room from Age of Calamity, as well as everything else. Let me know what you think of this castle down below, as well as any ideas for the open passageways that we still have not filled in, as we currently have 2 non-canon passageways where we can attach rooms to if there's space. And of course, there will be more of the castle soon coming. It just takes a long time to work on, and you guys suggested that you'd want to see a recap. So here we are. Let me know your thoughts down below and have a wonderful rest of your week. Well, have a good day. Bye bye.